We go forever and ever, yeah. You know that I'm much better, yeah. You wish that you can do better, no, no, won't let them, We go forever and ever, yeah. I go and create the pressure, yeah. You wish that you can do better, You wish that you can do better, yeah, yeah. Ooh, we go forever and ever. We go forever and ever.
Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I'll be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about men's health, mental health, men's group, helping men become better. And in our society today, we have many men who are confused in the sense of who they should be. Whether it's because they are trying to figure out their pronouns, or if they're trying to figure out what type of emotions they should be today. Men are simple in the sense of what we want is what we go for. In our world today now, we have so many options, so we start to not take as much action. And what happens when we don't take action as men is that we become complacent. We become weaker. Why do you think so many people play video games all day long? Because it's easy, it's simple. We don't have to make choices. We go into a little bubble of nothingness. But that nothingness brings nothing also. So we need to figure out how we can bring something into our life, meaning, passion. And when we begin to do that, something magical starts to happen. We start to become the person that we were always meant to be, the person that we were inclined to be. It's not that we are following what society says. We're doing what we want to do, looking at what we like, looking at what we want, and then living that life, and then changing it accordingly. Because you don't have to be on one path all your life. If you don't like where you are, you can change it. But sometimes when it comes to men feel like they don't have an outlet. They feel like they don't have a support system, when that's so far from the truth. I work with many men who are looking for a better mindset, whether it be for their career, their personal life, relationships. They're trying to figure out how to be. I have many young men who are finally getting off into the work career or going off into college. And one of the common things that they're afraid to do is to fail. Most of those men are afraid to fail. So what they choose to do is have inaction. They would rather have inaction than failure. I encourage you to look for failure. And not in the sense of if you're playing a basketball game, you should just miss your shots, right? And fail on purpose. Seek success, but if you fail, learn from it. It's going to be a powerful lesson for you. And the lessons that we learn in today's episode with my guest, Ted Phaeton, are going to be powerful, for the lack of better words. Because if you can learn how to be powerful, and not just your body, but your mind also, imagine what you can accomplish in your life. The conversation with Ted and myself, we talk about so many different topics and so many different things. Any man of any walk, of any culture is going to learn from this episode, because we have so much to share, and you're going to gain at the end of this episode all the knowledge, all the wisdom, and a new perspective of how you should show up in your day. So let's get into that interview with Ted Phaeton and myself.
I ran up a check, I might do it again. Enemies close, have me thinking they're friends.
Welcome, Ted Phaeton, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Rearden. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. So today I have you on as the founder of The Modern Man, and you are also the host of The Modern Man podcast. Podcast is unique in the sense of you're helping men, and this is something that many men don't even realize they need. Women are quick and easy to say, oh, I need help, I need some support. But for men, it's a little bit more difficult. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But before we dive into all that, please tell us who you are, what you do, and how you help.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ted Phaeton is the name. By morning, I can't really say by day, but by morning, I'm a meteorologist. I wake up very early, 2 a.m., and I do the weather for the local news station here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Outside of that, my passion is the modern man. Men's mental health, connecting men in pursuit of their potential is my mission, because I do feel that we all have this innate desire to be more than what we are, to kind of find out what we're made of, right? And I've been blessed to have some great male role models in my life that's helped me tap into some of my potential. And I realize that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm looking to cultivate more of that community and really bring guys together to have deep, intimate relationships, not only to accomplish great things, but also to help navigate the difficulties that the world is sure to throw in our face. And that has come through personal experience and adversity. Both of my parents are immigrants from Haiti. I grew up not wanting much. We weren't rich, but we certainly weren't poor. My parents put me in Catholic school, which gave me a very unique perspective of the world. The city that I grew up in had a little bit more poverty, I saw experiences of what it looked like to struggle. And then I would get on the bus, go to school at a Catholic school where I also saw experiences where an 18-year-old kid could drive an H2 Hummer and a 17-year-old girl could be upset because she got the base BMW model. So that was a huge kind of duality that I grew up in. So at a young age, the whole myth of if you want more money, work harder was debunked because my parents were the hardest working people I knew. But I go to school and these kids would have parties at their parents' house because they're in Dubai or they're in the Maldives and they're rich and they are always on vacation. So I saw that duality at a young age. And that's when I kind of think my parents' work ethic, along with my taste for bouginess, came together for my ambition. That led me into college wanting to do computer science. But after 1 year, 1.9 GPA, academic probation, had to figure something out. And luckily, through kind of the counseling of some friends that I entrusted and really just self-awareness and self-reflection, I honed in on what I was passionate about, which was science, and earth science was my passion in high school. And the school that I was at had a great meteorology program. So that allowed me to graduate with a degree in meteorology. And then obviously when I graduated, there was a rough stint to get into the TV field. It's a very competitive field. So I spent 3 years working at a law firm, which were some dark years for me. I got diagnosed with the autoimmune disease during that time, ulcerative colitis, multiple flare-ups, one of which landed me in the hospital for a couple of weeks, lost 30 pounds in 30 days, almost lost my large intestine. And that's when my victim mentality shifted into more of my positive growth mentality, which is, in my opinion, led me to where I am today.
You and I have similar stories in the sense of how we grew up. And I'm not sure if it's because we're Black men or if it's because where we grew up. You're from New York, I'm from Connecticut. So just being maybe from that region, maybe that's a commonality growing up. My mother's ancestors, they came from Puerto Rico, maybe in the 30s or the 40s. And they were in New York, actually. And they worked in New York for quite some time until they moved to Connecticut, where that's where they kind of resided for the stint after that. And they still do live there. We grew up the same. We grew up, I would say, lower middle class, maybe. We grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. At once, it was an industrial city. It was where GE was. They built ammo there. It was a hub. Sears was there. They had the big mall. And then when everything kind of died out and everyone left, the city kind of died out too. And then so it was kind of like that decay that was there. So my mother, she did her best. She worked, 2, 3 jobs to put us through Catholic schools also. So I saw it. I saw the same thing. You can be sheltered for so much of the city life, but you can't be sheltered 100% from it. Because even if you go to a Catholic school, you're going to get maybe one end of the spectrum that teaches you something, right? So you were on that spectrum of mom and dad are taking you on vacations across the world versus me. I didn't really have that at my school because, again, we were in a poor city. So all the people who were there were barely able to make the tuition. But that was a better alternative than going to one of the public schools in the area because there's a lot of violence, gangs, stuff like that. So in a sense, I was sheltered growing up. And then off to college, I started doing accounting, business finance. First year, I was like, okay, I kind of like this. Second year, I was like, I hate this. So I changed also. And then after I went to teaching, and then I got my degree in teaching and education, went on to be a teacher. I wanted to talk about the idea of different paths because we were basically maybe dealt a similar hand where maybe you could have been a teacher, maybe you could have been an accountant also, but you weren't, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think our paths are in line with what they are rather than what maybe society says, what our parents say, what our friends are doing? More so, we try something maybe once and we're like, "Ugh, I don't like that."
Yeah. I think so. There's a level of risk adverseness that comes into play. Do you have any siblings, if you don't mind me
Yes,
asking?
yes,
Older or younger?
both.
Okay. How many older siblings?
One.
Okay. I would say what helped me was the fact I'm the youngest of four, right? My parents, they've been through it already. So by the time I was growing up. And when I say the youngest of four, in my household, I had my older sister. My other older siblings were already out of the household growing up. But a lot of the things that I was walking into was following the path of my sister. You know, she went to college. She picked a major in biology, right? And being the child of an immigrant, my parents are like, okay, you got three options in life. You could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, or you could be a failure, right? So I think, and I don't know if it was similar for you, but I found, at least for someone who has an older sibling, sometimes it's about paving their own way. There's a little bit of rebellion in there, right? It's okay, my older sibling did this, and my parents are like, oh, you see how such and such did it. Or if the older sibling maybe did something that the parents didn't like, they say, well, don't be like such and such. But because of that, you're almost wanting to create your own identity so you can get out of the shadow of the person who was older than you and did everything first. My sister graduated high school before me. My sister went to college before me. She graduated to get a job before me. But everything I did was different. And my parents were like, oh, you're going to do what? Oh, mom and dad, I'm going to be in TV. What? But that helped me craft more of my identity. And I think for a lot of us, we either stick to the plan that's in front of us, and sometimes there might be someone listening right now who is following the playbook that was laid out in front of them, and they probably have a comfortable life, but for some reason they feel like something's missing. And what I think that is, you know, the passion, the purpose, you know, the drive behind it. And I do think having my older siblings who have really, they ran the gambit. I used to always joke, like, why'd you guys have to set the bar so high? Because, you know, my older brother was a Marine, then he lived in California, was a sheriff's deputy, and then he's a firefighter and going to school to be a physician's assistant. My older sister is a dentist, now owns her own dentistry clinic. My other older sister is a chemist. And I'm just like, TV. It was one of those things that I was thankful that they did it all in front of me, because it made it easier for me to be like, no. And the disappointment to my parents weren't as heavy because they at least saw the proof in the pudding with the older sibling. And I think I had a little bit more leniency to be a little bit more rebellious, a little riskier, try different things. And for them, speaking about my parents, I think it was more something new for them too. I think, you know, they were used to certain things, but when I kind of gave the curveball, I kept it exciting for them. And that for me was kind of some of the motivator. So that's what I think might be some of the reason why we might have taken similar paths. We might have seen different opportunities because we've had more permission to deviate from that.
My brother, he went to trade school, so he went off to be an electrician, and I was actually the first one to go off to college. Again, when I started, I was doing accounting, business finance. My mom was very proud of me. She was like, good, you're going to make some money. But when I told her I was going to switch to teaching, oh man, the words I got, what? You know, like shock, like utter shock. And I'm not sure if she will even remember that day because we were just in the living room at my great grandmother's house, and I told her, and she was just like, you know, like gave me that look, and I was like, you know, she's not happy about it. Eventually, you know, she kind of let me live my life and let me go down the path I wanted to. She didn't really say that I couldn't do it because, of course, I was going to do what I wanted because that was my personality. I'm very stubborn. And my mom knows that. So she knows how to deal with me, you know, as many parents should know how to deal with their children. So she knew how to deal with me. She's like, well, you know, like if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. You know, I'm going to support you. It's that unconditional love aspect of parents, I think. It's like, no matter what you do, I'm going to love you. So I think she gave herself that discussion in private. And then she's like, okay, I don't care what he does. More so, before, she was very proud of me being business finance and accounting. And I'm sure she was proud of me as a teacher, but it wasn't, you know, the same. I will say that it wasn't the same. But now that I have a business and a podcast and, you know, like we are growing to something more than probably she ever thought in her mind, I think she could be proud in the sense of he did something with his life versus he's wasting his life away. Yeah. And I remember when I was a teacher, I loved education. I love teaching children. I love teaching adults. It doesn't necessarily matter who I teach or what I teach. I just love the aspect of teaching. Actually, one of my mentors helped me find out what my passion was, even though I knew. It's just that I was dabbling in it and then I was running away from it. And then he finally made it blatantly aware to me. He's like, your passion, your purpose, your why, it's education, it's teaching. Why are you running away from it? I was always running away from it. I was always chasing the money. And he was like, just do that and you'll be completely set for life. When that happened, I think I was in 2017 when he finally made it so aware to me, because I was like in teaching for like 4 or 5 years. And then I was like, okay, I taught for a good amount. Now I'm going to go do accounting and make some more money. And I was just in and out. I was in and out. And I was confused because I didn't necessarily have a guidepost like you did, like a older sibling who went to college and went down this path. It was the first time for me. And I think for men, it's the first time sometimes for them to be a father, be the man of the household, be the savior of the story of his story. Because if we look at typical average Black family, they grow up without a father, typically. They grow up in a single mother household or by their grandparents. These men that are growing up, they don't know how to be men. And my father is the perfect example of that. He didn't have a father growing up. He was raised by his mother. And even though his father wasn't dead, he was alive, the father didn't want to be in the picture. And even later down in life, I think it was I think my father was like late 20s, maybe early 30s, where the father or his father finally wanted to come in the picture and say, hey, I want to be father now. He dejected him. He says, no, you're dead to me. The conversation I'm sure that happened was, you're dead to me and my kids don't know you. You're dead to them too, right? So like I never met the man, but my dad had to learn how to be a man. But my dad, of course, he's a teen, he's in public schools, and he's a bad boy, right? He's in, riding motorcycles, in and out of jail, getting fights, going to bars. Like if you ask my dad when he was in his prime, his late teens and his 20s, he would say, yeah, he was very naughty in the sense of he was doing a lot of things he shouldn't have been doing. And also, one of the things that he did was he had kids at a young age at 18. So he had my brother at 18. I think he had me, maybe he was like 21. What had happened was he had to leave that life behind. He had to like get rid of all that fun that he was having and be a parent. Well, he wasn't ready. He didn't know how. So he just ran away basically. So he kept doing what he was doing. My mom raised us and we saw him sporadically. Sometimes we would wake up and he would be there. And, we would go weeks without seeing him, maybe months, and then we'll see him for a weekend or something like that. He was in the picture as much as he could be, but he wasn't in the picture like your standard traditional father would be. And it wasn't until his mother finally kicked him out saying, hey, you need to go stay with your family. You need to go live with your family. He finally started to go down that process. But learning how to be a man. How can a man learn how to be a man if there is not a man? And I know some of the work you do might be the key for that.
First and foremost, for any parents that might be listening and they're thinking, I'm speaking maybe to the single mothers out there who might have a son and they're thinking to themselves, okay, what do I do? Right? Because it's no fault of your own. Positive male role models, I think, are so important in our society because as a young boy, I remember, as loving as my mom was, I'm a mama's boy, right? As loving as my mom was, I looked at other men to emulate, right? I'm trying to find my identity growing up. So we see that narrative with a lot of young boys who get into trouble, get into fights, going out, maybe drinking, and doing all these things, mischief. It's because there's this innate search for validation. I think the important thing is positive male mentorship. And one way, a great way, is usually in sports. Coaches are great male mentors for any single moms that might be looking for, okay, how can I get my son some good positive male examples? Coaching, sports, it builds camaraderie, right? It focuses their energy and their strength onto something so they can aim it for good. I talk about this a lot for young boys growing up. There's this thing in us, this schools might call it ADHD, right? But there's this desire of almost rebellion, but there's this, I think, this awareness of strength, of ambition, of exploration, curiosity. We want to tap into that. We want to figure out, what is this? What is that? What we're exploring. We need to aim that, or else, unfortunately, we can get hurt. Curiosity killed the cat, right? But curiosity also brought the cat back. We need, whether it's male teachers, whether it's coaches, honestly, whether it's just community events in your town, in your city, these are aspects. It could be a piano teacher. I do think when you find an aim for a young man and that aim matches with their innate skills, interests, and passions, watch out because they are going to go all in. And what's funny about that, for me, the proof in the pudding was when I got to high school was the first time I ever played organized sports. Tried out for football. My sophomore year, I made the team. Did wrestling, track. By all definitions, I'm a pretty athletic person. The most painful thing to hear as a 14 and 15-year-old when I'm playing football with other kids who've been playing for 7, 8 years, I'm making the team. Like I made it past cuts and I make the team over kids who've played for 6, 7 years, is when a coach looked at me and said, Ted, you have so much potential. If you went to any other school, you'd be a starter. Because the school I went to, they won 5 straight championships in football. I was second string, but I was on special teams. I got in games and stuff, but my coach just said, you have so much potential. If you went to any other school on Long Island, you'd be a starter and you'd probably have a scholarship to a D1 school. That hurt. And I remember going to my parents and I was like, why didn't you guys put me in sports at a younger age? They said, well, we know you. We know how you are. You get obsessive. When you have a goal, when you have something, you go all in. And if you got in sports early, you would not have focused on school. My rebuttal was, well, if school was the contingency for me to play sports, I probably would have done the contingency to play sports, right? But all that just to say is my parents knew how passionate I could get. My parents knew that putting something in front of me is going to set the goal, set the mission. These are kind of some of the verbiage that we say in our group, right? What's the mission, right? What's the focus? What's the purpose? Because men gravitate to that kind of language. Okay, you give me a mission, give me an objective, I'm going to go for it, right? I'm going to go right through the obstacles. I'm going to go for it. And there's probably some men listening who are probably getting fired up the way I'm talking. You might hear my voice getting fired up because those are some of the things that we can get behind, right? I do think us as people, all people, we admire strength, we admire grace, we admire beauty, and it's amazing when all that comes together, which is why I think sports are so popular, because you're looking at strength, beauty, and grace at its highest form. And that's why athletes are so revered and they're so highly paid and everyone wants to be on a Super Bowl commercial, right? Because it's the combination of passion, drive, focus, effort, expertise, excellence, strength, grace. That all comes together. So for any parents that might be thinking, okay, how do I get male role models for my child? It's what are they interested in? What do they like? And I say piano teacher because a piano teacher could excel that child, but also that piano teacher. And I apologize if anyone's getting triggered, right? Thinking, oh, why does my young boy have to have a male piano teacher or anything like that? But like I said earlier, that young boy is going to look for a man to emulate. There's a lot of examples on Instagram. There's a lot of examples on TV. They have that. And for parents, I can only imagine how difficult it is filtering that. Now, when you have the control of who's going to spend intimate time with your child, and you know that your child is going to emulate, because young girls do this too. They try and emulate older women that they like, that they want to be like, right? So this is just as true, I would say, for the single moms with daughters or the single fathers with daughters that are listening. Your child will emulate someone, and sure, you're going to be their first hero if they're the same gender, and if they identify as the same gender. You're going to be the first hero who they look up to and they admire. But if your child is of the opposite gender and you don't have that in the household, find someone that can love them, that can pour into them, that could teach them, that could be you mentioned education, your love for teaching, right? That's the first level of really pouring into somebody. I love the depiction of, you see a human figure with puzzle piece holes in them, and there's a puzzle in their hand, and there's a child almost complete with one missing puzzle piece, and that's in the hand. That's literally what happens through teaching and parenting and mentorship, is you're giving pieces of yourself into this child. That child will never forget it. I never forgot my first mentor. I never forgot my coach, Coach Reichert. To this day, my first football coach, I know his name. It's because they left a lasting impression on my life. I'm not an amazing football player, but he offered me structure. He offered me correction. That, I think, is what is important for any parent that has a young child that they're hoping to have grow up with good, positive role models in their lives. Find their passion, find their craft, and then find the teachers, mentors, instructors that can pour into that child. Because what's going to happen is that child's going to, in essence, look up to that person.
I don't know what episode it was. I mean, I have so many episodes out, but I talked about the same idea that a man is going to find a male role model, whether you like it or not, be it positive or negative. It's better to give him a positive role model than a negative role model, because if you give them a negative role model, they might be a gangbanger, someone who sells dope. You don't want that, right? Especially if you're a single parent, you don't want your kid to be in that world. And if you do, then you have to look at your values and you have to look at where he's going to be later on in life, because he might not make it past 25 if he's going down that road. I have friends who didn't make it, who went down that road. Crazy, because they weren't even able to drink yet. Like, why can't we grow up and have all this opportunity? Men look at men and they see money. Oh, he got money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have money. How can I get money? Oh, I got to do what he's doing. So that's how we learn. We learn from our environment. And if we have a very negative environment, how can we start to protect our children and then give them a better outcome, a better positive alternative? And you hit the nail on the head with a positive mentor. And when I was a teacher, I did mentoring with some of the troubled children. We're so quick to label men, especially with ADHD, behavioral issues. And to be honest, they're just misunderstood. They just need someone to talk to. They just need someone to guide them. And as soon as they find that person that they resonate with, they're a different person. I've worked in special ed for over 2 years, my last years of teaching, and I worked with some of the most hostile, most behavioral challenged young men. And I'm talking about these men would tear up a whole classroom, break desks, windows, anything, right? Cops get called and the cops are there like, I don't know what to do with this kid, right? Because he's 7 or 8, right? And he's having this outburst and cops are having to put him in handcuffs to, for his safety, because he's like literally like banging his head against the wall, like he's going to kill himself if we don't do something. And it's that cry for attention. We cry to be acknowledged. It might not seem that loud, especially when you're a parent, because parents have one crutch. We're busy. We have to work, right? We have to be the protectors and providers for our kids in our society today. Two-parent households, if you have one, both parents are working, right? They have to make ends meet. So now these kids are growing up, and maybe they're growing up with their grandparents, but maybe they're just kind of left home and, left to their own accord, or left on the iPad or on the YouTube or on their smartphone. So they're learning from popular culture, modern culture. And what modern culture is teaching women is different than what is teaching men. But today we're going to focus on men because it's a rabbit hole for women. What is teaching men is that we don't matter, in the sense that there's so many other people who are better. Just given that mentality, it's very vague, but like it will click to some people. There's a reason why there's a push for mental health in men nowadays. And there's the emotional intelligence aspect of men finding their voice and becoming more emotional and becoming more in touch with their feminine side, right? There's a reason for that, right? And the reason why is because they are in that constant battle of their head. They have some type of mental disorder, not in the sense it's diagnosable by like a doctor, but they're giving themselves that hurdle. My yoga teacher, she gave me one of the greatest quotes that I hold true to this day, and it's very relatable. One of the biggest walls we will ever climb in our life is in our mind, and we put it there. So when we're young men and we're trying to figure out what we do, we're giving ourselves a path to our goal, our mission. What we start doing subconsciously, we start putting walls up in areas that are too much work, too dangerous. My friends are not doing this. My parents said I can't do this. So we are narrowing our vision of what we can do. And it's dangerous to do that, especially as men, because then you're going to find yourself unhappy. When we look at the rate of people taking someone's lives, like their own life, men are more successful than women, even though women try more. Because
Correct.
men just have that innate drive of, I'm going to do this, right? Similar to how you said, this is my task. I'm giving myself a task. And when a man gives himself a task, move out of his way, because he's going to handle his business. And that was something my father had taught me in 3rd grade. He says, handle your business. So saying that I hold to this day. Handle your business every single day, no matter what comes your way. Handle your business. If you don't handle your business is going to handle you. So it's very important that we understand ourselves, right? So if we don't understand who we are becoming, then we are not going to become the people we're supposed to be, and we're going to be very unhappy. And that unhappiness is causing a discrepancy in the male community right now, where many men are not showing up. Many men are choosing to be more feminine. Many men are not choosing fatherhood when they know they should. It's because they want the easy way out.
Yeah.
It's because they have built all those walls in their life, kind of going back to that analogy. and they're looking for the easiest path that they can be on, when in reality, they should get a sledgehammer and start breaking down those walls so they can get a broader range of what they should be doing. Having a group of men, whether it be a men's group, a sports coach. For me, I was, basketball, fifth grade, Coach Jackson. Sixth grade, Coach Jackson. Seventh grade, Coach Jackson. I actually didn't play in fifth grade because we were having family issues and my father had the insurance. He didn't give us the insurance card, but you had to have insurance and go for a physical in order to be on the sports team. Well, I never could get the physical because I never had the insurance card. So I had to forego my fifth grade basketball. I remember when I went in sixth grade to try out again, coach pulled me to the side. He goes, "Are you going to join the team this time?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm going to join the team because I have the insurance card now," because I had it in my hand. Because I remember I asked my dad, it's like, "Hey, can I have the insurance card?" And he gave me one. I don't think the coach knew that though. Like he didn't know my situation at home. He just thought I was running away from the team, but it was in reality, I was having family issues. But he was there for me. And one of the greatest things that I learned from him was you have so much more to give in the tank. I mean, when you're down and out and you're like huffing and puffing and you think you can't go one more step and you go one more step, it's very clear of how strong the human mind is, how strong the human body is, and what we can do when we put our mind to it. What are some ways that if a young man is looking for unlocking his innate urge, or I guess you could say his manly instinct to be like the protector, the provider, the fighter that he should be, rather than the very complacent man society is creating today? How can we unlock that for our future generations? So when young men are listening to this episode, this podcast, they say, "I'm going to choose to be strong rather than silent and complacent and weak."
I would say build mental and physical fortitude. The very first thing is start doing hard things. I agree. I mean, did a social experiment, kick on Netflix, Hulu, whatever show of choice, and turn it on and see how the men in that show are depicted. Rarely, I'm not saying I don't like speaking in finality or generalities, but rarely is that man depicted as a strong man, as a strong, present, masculine man. Because of that, I think we grow up with this image of a complacent man. We grow up with this image. I think of, Homer Simpson comes to mind, right? Or Family Guy comes to mind. These popular sitcoms that we watch, Married with Children, sitting on the couch, relaxing. That's part of the mission of modern man is I want the mainstream to start acknowledging the fact that we have strong men who wake up every day and help their family the best way they can. And I say help their family the best way they can because I think times have changed. Providing does not necessarily mean making the money. And we need to kind of acknowledge that as men, because I think what we hold on to is an archaic identity. Like I gotta be hard. I gotta be out there making the money, come home with my dinner ready. No, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is first physical fortitude. I always resort to fitness. I remember I was 135 pounds my senior year of high school. I was on the football team, but I was 135 pounds, soaking wet, 5'6" or so. I was the smallest on my varsity roster. I was tiny. And then I got to college, got a little bit of a beer gut, this, at the other thing. But I remember when I started working out, I couldn't bench the bar. And then I got a little stronger and I got a little more competent. My shoulders got a little broader. It pulled my shoulders back a little bit more. I stood a little bit taller. And you know what ended up happening, Rearden? Girls started paying a little bit more attention to me. All of a sudden, my confidence started coming up a little bit. And when my friends would roughhouse with me, I was actually able to hold my own. Those were things that were more transformational for me psychologically than they were physically. On the outside, I might have had a little bit of a bigger arm. I might have had maybe some abs poking out here and there. But what really changed was on the inside. It was the fact of the matter of I've been doing something consistently for a long time that garnished a result, a desired result. So then all of a sudden, and I talk about the first book that helped me was No More Mr. Nice Guy. It talks about setting your priorities, putting yourself first. I went from being a people pleaser to rearranging my schedule for others and this, the other thing to, hey, Ted, can you come hang out this afternoon? I got to go to the gym first. Why? Because I'm committed to something, right? I have a goal. I have a mission. I see progress. I'm working on something that I don't want to give up because this outcome's more important to me than hanging out on a Thursday afternoon after class. So that physical fortitude helped shape my confidence, mental fortitude. I don't know if you've spoken much about ice baths or cold showers or things like that, but I dabbled in that for a while. I used to take cold showers. I used to turn that thing as cold as it can and sit there. And initially your body's like, get out, get out. But then I'd sit there and I'd sit there for at least a minute. Then a minute turned to 2 minutes. Then all of a sudden the water wasn't cold enough. So I'm thinking to myself, did the temperature of the water change or did my ability to sit in it change? And it was my ability, right? It was just as cold coming down on my head and I was standing there calm. And again, what does that do? It transitioned my mental resolve. So not only do I have more of a confidence in my physical fortitude, but now my mental fortitude, my ability to withstand discomfort, my ability to sit in the discomfort has increased. So now I'm a married man. I don't have kids yet. I'll be 100% honest with you, transparent with the viewers and the listeners. We've had challenges in our marriage from the get out. We landed on our honeymoon. We got married on a Friday, landed in Texas for a mini moon on a Monday. 45 minutes in, 2 missed calls, text messages from my sister. My dad was rushed to the hospital, didn't even make it home. He was still in Greenville, South Carolina, where we got married. Family's gone. My dad went from surrounded by family and celebrating on a Friday to everybody flew out Sunday. He flew out Monday to see us off on our honeymoon. So he left after us, but he was sitting on the plane. My mom had grabbed him off the plane beforehand because he looked so bad and he was rushed to the hospital. 3 blocked arteries to his stomach. He had to have emergency surgery. My dad turns 81 in November. My dad's not a young man. Surgery at that age is a risk. I remember pulling to the side of the road, breaking down, crying. We had to cut our honeymoon short. I had to fly home, woke up 4 a.m. to drive 45 minutes to a different airport to fly home on 2 flights that ended up being delayed 2 hours to land in Atlanta at 6 p.m. to drive 2 hours and a half hours to make it just in time at like 8 o'clock or 7:30 before visiting hours finished at 8 o'clock to see my dad right after surgery. Then after that, grab my mom, whose bags were on the plane that took off, take her to Ross's, buy her some clothes. She was put up in a hotel and come back home. My parents had to stay with me those 2 weeks. Those things, while I'm also trying to get a new job and all this, those things are called life. And I don't want to be the man that runs away from life. And the thing I could look back at when I spent the days off for my honeymoon, driving back and forth from the hospital twice every day, because this is also during COVID. So there's only 2 visitors allowed. I would drive to the hotel, pick my mom up, drive her in the morning for visiting hours to be there. They would stop the visiting hours at noon. We would leave. Then I would go home. The hospital was like 45 minutes from my house. Then I'd come back. We'd go back to visiting hours from, I think it was 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Those were my days. That's how I spent my honeymoon. My wife was also resilient through this. We just got married. Right after they leave, we get COVID. After getting COVID, we have to pack a house because I'm literally moving to a new state. Me and my wife are moving to a new state. So we have to sell the house while my mom and dad are in the house with us. My dad's recovering from surgery. So he's let go out of the hospital. He stayed with us for another 2 weeks recovering, right? I laugh at my wife. I'm like, welcome to marriage, babe. Sickness and health. You're taking care of your in-laws, right? But all that was tough. It was hard. And I know when kids come into the picture, there are going to be days that are tough, that are hard. And we talk about it all the time in Modern Man. Life is going to punch you in the face. Whether you're in a storm, just got out of one, or heading into one, the one thing I can guarantee in life is it will be hard at times. And if we are conditioned to run away from it, we're going to let down the people we love. If we are conditioned to run away from it, we're going to be absent for some of the most important days of those loved ones' lives, whether it's a birthday, anniversary, or whether it's something more detrimental, right? I need you right now. So increase your mental resolve, increase your physical resolve. I'm not one to just be wholehearted, like this is the way. I'm saying what's worked for me, but I'm also going to say for some, they might not be like, I don't want to be all big and strong and this, the other thing. I'm not talking about being a bodybuilder. I'm talking about, listen, I pick up heavy things. That's how I work out. When we go to cycle class, my wife, she's cycling circles around me. I can't imagine being on a bike with the resistance at 8, pedaling for 45 minutes. I'm good for maybe a minute, but my wife does that all the time. So strength has different meanings to different people, right? But whatever it is, whether you're a runner, marathon runner, whether it's yoga, whether it's martial arts, whether it's, which I would also recommend, whether it's cycling, pick something that challenges you daily and do it. Get conditioned and get comfortable being uncomfortable, because I promise you, life is going to get uncomfortable. And if you're not prepared to face it, if you're not prepared to show up, men, show up. That's all we need to do. Be there, be present. Because there's times my wife needs help and I don't know the answer. I don't know what to do. But I would sit there with her and I'd be like, I'm in it with you. I'm here. Let's go. And that is where our masculinity shines. And that's where the femininity shines, right? It's the ability to sit in that discomfort with your partner, with your loved ones, with your friends, with someone who's going through something. You've done the work with yourself to pour into someone else. So those walls that are in our head, man, I know them all too well because I have them. I say have because I still have walls. I have a lot of walls I still need to break down. Walls of self-doubt, walls of limiting beliefs, right? Walls of times where this is the best. If anyone's listening and they're married, they might know about this. Walls where you go to your wife, like, babe, are you mad at me? Like, is something wrong? And they're like, no, what's wrong? I was like, oh, I thought you were mad at me. You know what I mean? Like, you got to validate with your friend. Like, oh, are you mad at me? Is something wrong? What's going on? I'm getting a vibe here. I don't know where it came from. But those difficult conversations, right? Man, lean into what's hard, because anyone listening, male, female, it's not one or the other. All of us have an amazing potential, strength, and resolve within us. And so many of us don't tap into that. Now, I do think women are better at this because they have networks, they have supports. You're with a group of women, they go to the bathroom, the bathroom in groups, right? Not because they can't stand to be alone for a few seconds, but because they're more comfortable being together. They're more comfortable being vulnerable and sharing with each other. We don't do that well as men, right? We walk around with armor like we have things figured out. Well, here's the thing about a clean suit of armor. It's never been to battle. I'm not interested with somebody that has a clean suit of armor. If you walk in here, you're battered and you got all your problems on you and you're still standing, bro, help me. Help me, because you look like you've been through it. You look like you've been through it, but you're still standing. When I was young, you talk about the kids of, wanting to make money and falling into other things. That's because we look at superficial and false examples of manhood. How hot is their wife, or how many women are they sleeping with? What car are they driving? How much money is in their bank account? We look at these things as measurements of men when they do have weight. I'll give it that. They have weight, but that weight doesn't make the man. It doesn't make the person. When I was young, I looked up to those people. I admit it. I looked up to the guys with the nice cars, the guys with the beautiful women, right? I looked up to the guy going to the club and buying out the bottles and stuff. I looked up to that. You know who I look up to now? I look up to the man who's been in a 20+ year marriage, who's at his kid's baseball game, his kid's recital and play, wakes up in the morning, goes to work, comes home, helps finish dinner, helps clean the dishes, cleans the house, folds the laundry while the wife is working on something, because we live in a world now both the mom and dad are working, right? That's the house I grew up in. I grew up with my dad cooking when my mom was working late, because just like your parents, my mom had to work more in order for me to go to Catholic school. She would work overtime till 11 p.m. sometimes. She'd miss Christmas sometimes. But when she's working late, my dad's cooking, cleaning. My dad's holding it down. I see this network growing up. For me, that's what the manhood was. That's what the masculinity was for me. Men, if you're listening, show up. Build that resolve mentally and physically, and show up when it's tough. That's going to go a long way.
And we have to begin to define ourselves too, because oftentimes we think if we have an easy life, we're going to have a good life. But if you're thinking about looking for the best views in life, it's going to require you to maybe go up a steep hill, right? You want to go, see the whole view of your city. You're going to have to go climb a big ass hill.
Yeah.
So sometimes, they have like driving paths that you can drive up there, but it's not the same as if you walked it and you climb to the top. You get so much more intrinsic value from that. When you do things like that, you learn again just how powerful you are. You define yourself, you give yourself meaning, purpose. And then also one of the good things happen is that you start to feel happy again. I did this. I did this. I did this. It's not the sense that I have to do everything because you can work as a team, you can work as a unit for a common goal. Sometimes we give ourselves the wrong I. I have to be the provider. I have to be the protector. I have to be the lover. I have to be the person that makes everything right. When in reality, you can ask for help. You can ask, who can help me? Similar to how you were looking at who's your person you look up to. And the way I look at leadership is I look at someone I would like to follow. And I see leadership as me looking at the back of someone and me trusting that person, regardless of where I'm going. I'm trusting that person because I'm putting my faith in them. And it can be anyone. It can be anyone. That's what typically goes on in the minds of young men, college students. They're looking for someone to follow. And if they don't have someone to follow, that's when they kind of go wavy, they'll go out to the club and then they'll go into the books and then they try to figure out their purpose, right? They drop
Yeah.
down to 1.9 GPA or something like that. And then they find their purpose. Like even Denzel Washington, he had a very rough college start and then he was able to find his way, right? It's very wavy when you don't have a back to look at. So my advice to young men, especially, to find someone that you can follow, find someone that is going to be a leader in your eyes, that you see someone as like, I love what he's doing. It's not that you want his life. It's just that you respect him.
Yeah.
You respect him. And if you can respect that individual, then you can, of course, appreciate what they have done. And it's not that, oh, you have to follow in their footsteps because we're going to have different paths. Just how we started this podcast. You had a different path than I did, even though we have similar circumstances. The
Hmm.
circumstances don't necessarily define who we become at the end. We do that. So we find mentors, we find different paths. We don't allow the walls to come up into our life. We don't look for easy. We look for what needs to be done. And when we start to do that, then we have an option to be the person we can be or to continue to be the person society has led us to be. And I always tell people to choose the person that you were destined to be because regret is one of those things that we can mitigate. And oftentimes, many people think they have time. They think that something is impossible when really it's just a mindset. Developing that mental fortitude is key. Some of the work I do as a mindset coach is dealing with that, getting rid of your limiting beliefs and then instilling you with all the mindset knowledge that you need to push past any of your goals. Because sometimes we give ourselves a destination and we say, once I get there, that's happiness. But when reality, happiness is more of a journey. As long as you keep on pushing, you're always going to be getting to that next level. Because in life, there's not some set point where you say, okay, at 65, I made it. Because the people who reach that set point and they don't give themselves a passion or a purpose, they start to deteriorate. Look at nursing homes. When you put someone into a nursing home, they drop so quickly. I worked in a nursing home for 6 years. You can see when they come in to where they are in 3 months, night and day. And so we always have to give our brain something to push for. We always have to give the body another challenge because the brain likes challenge. The brain likes problems, but we need to give ourselves good problems. Not, oh, John next door has a BMW. I need a BMW. You don't need a BMW, right? You need a car that's going to get you to work from A to B, things like that. Society has lied to us in the sense of what we need. We need to look at what we need. And when you can figure that out, then things start to change.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because identity is so important. And one thing I always say when it comes to modern man is, no man is a template, nor will they ever be. Right? The only perfect man I know is Jesus, and he's not walking amongst us right now. And why that's important is because I remember there's a number of people I look up to, and the biggest skill I think we can learn as people is to learn how to eat the meat and leave the bones. What do I mean by that? I have a number of mentors, and one was a business mentor of mine who spent 100+ nights in a year in a hotel room, traveling, selling, making a lot of money. And I would ask him questions for business. He was one of my mentors. My now wife, girlfriend at the time, was like, "Hey, you're talking to this guy a lot. You're learning a lot from this guy, right?" I was like, "Yeah, he's mentoring me." She's like, "Yeah, but I mean, he travels so much, and that makes me nervous." And I smiled. I was like, "Well, he's giving me business mentorship." She's like, "I know, but you're learning a lot from him." I said, "Listen, When I want to learn business, I talk to the person I know is really good in business. When me and her might have a disagreement or we're having a hard time in our marriage, I'm calling my mentor who has a 20+ year marriage and I'm asking him marriage advice. When we talk about a board of directors or when you have your circle of advisors, they should have varied skills. If you have 5 people in your circle who are all financial experts, great. You're going to be very comfortable financially. But I do think some other areas of your life might start to suffer. So for me, I have somebody that I talk to when it comes to finances. I have someone I talk to when it comes to relationships. I have someone that I talk to when it comes to business because they've each excelled in that realm and they have what I want in that realm. Now, what ends up happening is I'm taking the meat from 4 or 5 different people, bringing myself, and I'm leaving the bones. I'm leaving what I don't need. I could filter out what's useful to me and what's not. And then when I do that, I end up building my own avatar and my own identity into who I become because I have the pieces of different people that I've put on my own spin, put my own flavor to it. And then now I project that a little differently, which might resonate with somebody listening. And then they take that and then they build their own. And that's how this puzzle pieces and these handing off of mentorship and giving of ourselves projects forward and ripples to impact the world. So when it comes to identity, man, you're so right. And I just caution people to don't take 100% of someone. Not that that person is bad, but I don't know anyone that's perfect. And I know I'm far from it. I would tell anyone who's looking up to me, like, don't do everything I did. Don't follow everything I do because I might be good in relationships, terrible in business, right? I might be good in what I've done and what I've done might have worked for me, but it might not work for you. When it comes to dieting, if someone's like, oh, how do you stay slim? I intermittent fast. It works for my schedule. I wake up 2 a.m. I work all the way up through like 11 a.m. So I'm too busy to be hungry. For somebody who wakes up and they don't have that going on, they might be like, man, I'm hungry. I got to eat. You don't have the distraction that I have. So it might not work for you. So I think that's important. And another interesting thing when it comes to identity, and I was going to reference this earlier, which I love what you talked about with the different paths that we take in high school. We're always taught the famous questions, hey, Rearden, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Man, I hate that question. I hate that question so much because it puts so much weight on the choice of our degree. It puts so much weight on the choice of the profession we go into. Whereas you look at some people who have accomplished great successes in their lives. Michael Strahan, who was a football player and then a morning show host and still a morning show host, but now more of a journalist. Those are 3 different hats and 3 different hats at the top of the level of what he does. When someone says, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Maybe you reshape that in your head because you're thinking of locking yourself into an identity that's going to be quote unquote be a death sentence, right? Like I'm doing this until the day I die. No, 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 no. What do you want to be in this season? Season could be 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. But what do you want to be this season? And that kind of takes a little bit of the weight off of the decisions of what we choose to become, right? Because not that it gives us a backdoor, not that it gives us an out. One of my favorite quotes, I love, burn the boats, right? I love that. Don't necessarily just give yourself a plan B, go hard in what you want to do. Don't be reckless, but give yourself the full capacity into something that you're trying. You deserve that. Give it all you have, or else you're never really going to know if it would have worked or not if you don't give it all you have. But at the same time, it's easier to give it all you have when you know it's not going to be the only thing you have, when you know you're going to have an option down the line. And I do think that success and work ethic and skills are interchangeable. The skills that make me successful on air have been hugely helpful for me as a podcaster, has been hugely helpful for me as a blogger. Those things can translate in many different fields. So I encourage people, as you have your identity, as you have your board of advisors and you pick from the different templates that you take and you build your avatar and you choose a path, don't be so afraid to go hard in that path thinking that there's no out, because that path might lead to fruits in the future. You might do it for 5 years. It served you, you served it, and you move on. I worked at a law firm as a billing clerk for 3 years before getting into TV. When I got into TV, do public appearances, we would cover different stories, but we also, being a meteorologist, we would cover major storms. So I would have to go to the coast, get a hotel room with my photog, and we had company cards, and we would have to expense everything on the company card. But when we come back, we'd have to put it in the Excel sheet, log our expenses or whatnot. Well, here I am 4 years in my career in TV, filling out after I covered a storm, filling out my expense report. And HR lady comes to me. She's like, I've never had somebody do this so well. Like you're so good at this. How do you do that? I was a billing clerk for 3 years. That skill helped me in TV. So I just want to encourage people, as you craft your identity, understand that any path you pick is not a death wish. Go all in, give it your all, but it's not a death sentence. It's just this season.
As we're going on in life, we're going to gain so much knowledge, whether it be from books, from school. We learn through text, education, words, but there's something else that we can learn from: wisdom, embodied wisdom, us doing it. We did it. Just because we did it means that we have now learned what happens when we do it. So, for example, accounting for me, book looking for you, podcasting, things like that. You have done it. So now you know, because if there's a young man who's watching this and they say, I'm on that path, or I've been doing that too, let me pick your brain a little bit. And I always have people say, hey, I'm going to pick your brain, Michael. And they're always say, I'm going to pick your brain. And I'm like, all right, go for it. Right. But we learn from our wisdom too. So we do it. So don't be afraid to do things, and don't be afraid to try new experiences, because the more things you try, the more things you're going to love. And I think sometimes we have such a broad sense of love. We say, okay, I love this, and that's all I love. So you have a favorite food. I like pizza. Okay, well, do you like garlic bread? Do you like curry? Things like that. Oh, well, like I really haven't tried much curry, right? So we give ourselves something that we love, our favorite food. This is my favorite food, when really we don't have the world experience yet to have tried all the different cultures of food, to really have put ourselves out there. And there's so many different things that we can do every single day. And there's so many different things, or so many different ways that we can show up every single day. And you have to decide how you're going to show up. If it's inclined to like who you are and it makes you feel good, then do it. If it's positive, especially do it, right? Because it's helping you in some way grow. And that's what we need as men. We need to learn how to grow. We need to learn how to flourish. We need to learn how to look at one another, not as competition or as enemy, but someone who has walked this different path that we can learn from. And I think if we can do that, we as men are going to be in a better place, because we learn from men. Men learn from men. We give ourselves a mission. We give ourselves a purpose. And as long as we are driven towards something, we're always going to handle our business. Thank you, Ted, for coming on. But before we depart, I want to get any last words from you, and then please share your final thoughts.
Last words. This is always where I really want to be intentional, because I really want to make sure that I'm serving the listeners and those that are watching. I would say this: we spoke about the mental resolve. We spoke about following examples in life and showing up, even identity, right? I think at the end of the day, when you go through experiences in life, you evolve. Wisdom. When you use the example of of this might be your favorite, I smiled and I laughed because I thought of Chick-fil-A. I thought of a Chick-fil-A. Have you ever had a chicken biscuit?
Yeah.
I was 26 years old the first time I had a chicken biscuit, a chicken sandwich. I know that because I instantly, it's like one of those things, you take a bite and you just got mad. Like, how did I live life this long without this experience? I say that jokingly, but also it's true for so many of us living. We don't know what we don't know. And there's so much life to live. We don't know when our time is up. So for anybody that might not know what their purpose is, what their identity is, if you feel lost in life, like you're in the middle of the dark room, put your hands out and start walking. Start walking. You'll find a wall. You go along the wall. You're still in a dark room. You're lost, but that wall eventually leads to a door. You open that door. You're in another dark room. Great. But guess what? You're not where you were before you started moving. And when you start trying things, even if you don't like it, find as many things that you don't like as possible, because that leads you closer to what you do like. At the very least, the one thing I would love to leave the listeners with is, do me a favor after listening to this podcast. First, make sure you give it a rating and subscribe, because Rearden's doing an amazing job with this show, and I'm honored to be on it. Find a mirror, whether it's your rear view mirror at a red light, if you're listening to this while you're driving, Maybe it's the mirror in your bathroom when you're washing your hands after going to the bathroom. Linger for a second and look at yourself, because we avoid that. We don't do that because I don't know you personally, but you know yourself better than anybody else. So find that mirror, look at yourself, linger for a little longer, and ask yourself, is this what you want? And if the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is no, then ask yourself, what do you want? If you don't know that answer, that's okay. I say that because you are in control of your life and you only get this one. And we touched on regret. I don't want you to come to the end of the road and regret anything. And if you're thinking about risk, I'll put it like this: don't live cautiously through life to safely arrive at death. I don't know anybody that's made it out of this alive. So do yourself that favor. Look in the mirror, ask yourself if this is what you want, what you're doing, what you're living, where you're going, where you're heading, where you're working. And don't do anything drastically. Don't do anything irresponsible. If the answer is no, start making those little changes. Start making those incremental little changes. And if the answer is yes, great. Keep going. And if you're at the level of mastery in what you did and you think that's the top, actually, it's not the top. The highest level is not master. The highest level is teaching. Because once you become the master, that's when the student arrives and you pass that on.
Perfect. And share with the audience how they can find you.
themodernmanpodcast.com. You can get the podcast. You can get all of our episodes and our socials on that as well. I'm very active on Instagram. So you can find my handle, my personal handle at the real Phaeton forecast. That's the real Phaeton, spelled Phaeton, the number 4 KAST. And from Instagram and from themodernmanpodcast.com, you'll find all of my other links, socials, and everything I'm doing.
And I'm going to put all of those links in the description box below so people can easily find you, check out your podcast, check out the work that you're doing, your blogs. All amazing work, especially when it comes to helping men become more aware of who they can be. In a world of all the people who pretend to be someone else, we should look at ourselves in that mirror, as you said, and learn who we want to be, who we should be, and who we are. I want to thank you, Ted Phaeton, for coming on Coaching in Session. A great conversation today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone, I would like to thank my guest again, Ted Phaeton, for coming on Coaching in a Session, and I'd like to thank you for making it all the way through. It was a lengthy episode because we were just in it, and there was just so much conversation, and there was many conversations that we didn't get into that dived into specifics similar to like relationships or career. We might have touched base on them, but we didn't necessarily dive deep into them. But that's an opportunity for you, though, the viewer, the guest. You are able to reach out to any of us, whether it's myself or Ted, and begin to ask questions, especially if you are a man, a young man, an adult man, and you have questions, you have a path that you're on that you might not be sure about, you need some encouragement. There's nothing wrong with looking for encouragement. There's nothing wrong with looking for a mentor or for a guide or for asking for directions. You don't have to remain lost. And if you're a single mother maybe and you have a son that might need some guidance, casually offer him this episode. Just say, hey son, I have this episode. I would love for you to watch it or to listen to it. We can do it together. You can do it by yourself. Which one do you prefer? Because if you give him an option like that, typically people are going to choose the one they want better. So if they don't want to hang out with mom listening to the episode, most likely they're going to choose to listen to it themselves. So they will listen to it though, because you gave them a choice versus, hey, I want you to listen to this episode, but you didn't give them a choice when you said that. I encourage you to share this with as many young men as possible. If you're an educator, to share some of the values or some of the knowledges or some of the bites of wisdoms that we talked about today. Because we as men have so much more potential, and we are lacking in the field of being strong, of being the person that we could be, because we choose to not have, again, the actions that we should have. And we are in an epidemic of weak men at the moment because society has made us that way. We don't have to be those hunters and gatherers anymore. We don't have to go out and fight saber-toothed tigers and lions and live out into the cold and create fires for ourselves and live in caves. We live a very plush life, an easy life. The tough times that created us to be strong men are no longer there, so now our easy times have created us to be weak men. And those weak mindsets and that weak mentality is actually making it more difficult for us to live our life the way we want to. We need to learn how to live more fully. We need to learn how to live in abundance rather than in scarcity. And if you are looking for a change, if you're looking for a step up, if you're looking for a change, if you're looking for a change in mindset, then don't hesitate to reach out to either Ted or myself again. What I do as a mindset coach is I help people with the quality of their thoughts to look at more positive things and to look at how their life and how it can be better. And not saying that you have a bad life. You might have a great life, but just because you have a great life doesn't mean that there's nothing else for you. There's something else for you. There's always something else. There's always another mountain top to climb. There's always another person to help. There's always another mind to change. And when we look at change, it begins with ourselves. So start to look at yourself, similar to how Ted said to look in the mirror. Look at the mirror and see if you're happy with yourself, if you're satisfied with who you are. And if not, begin that change, begin that process. Because what happens when you begin that process is that your whole life begins to begin again rather than end. Life doesn't have to end at a certain age. It doesn't have to end at a certain contingency. It ends when we choose to stop pushing forward. So I encourage you to keep on pushing, to give yourself a mission, a purpose, to follow your passions, and be in line with the person that you were always destined to be. Because at the end of the day, you have everything you need right now in order to have everything you want in life. Sometimes you're just looking for that final piece of the puzzle. Have you found it? My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.